policy, and we have our speaker CS Sudha Bhushan ji, who is a chartered accountant and a company secretary. She is also an insolvency professional, registered valuer, and a registered independent director. She is an advisor to several multinational banks and have international operations over the globe. She is an expert in India FDI policy and FEMA and has been working in the area for more than 2 decades. She is the author of several books of FDI, FEMA, and international taxation. And my dear friends, I would like to congratulate CS Sudha ji for releasing FEMA practice manual day before yesterday. Thank you. Congratulations, Sudha ji. She is also a chairperson of Entrepreneur Now Committee of IMC and a member of Indo-French Chamber of Commerce and Industry, etc., etc. Further, she has been awarded many awards and recognition, including Women Empowerment through CA Profession by NIRC of CA Institute. So I invite CS Sudha Bhushan ji for providing her valuable insights and enlighten us with her immense knowledge and experience on today's topic. Over to you, Sudha ji.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubham ji, for the introduction. And thank you, Mr. Jariwala, for a wonderful session before me. And I would like to congratulate the Continuing Professional Education Committee for organizing this marathon on the of webinar and making use of the virtual world to maximum. To the chairperson of the committee, to the vice chairperson of the committee, Mr. Gyan Chandra Adukia ji, congratulations for the same. And yes, Shubham, my latest book is out a day before yesterday only. It's with Taxman, wherein I have dissected every section and every rule regulation under FEMA. So I'll share my presentation. You can see it? Shubham ji, you can see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much.
This is visible.
Yeah, yeah. So Indian FDI policy, a very good subject for all of us. Now, you know, I'll start with something like this, that from Neolithic age led by agricultural revolution to industrial revolution, to information age and now to digital age, change has always been the constant. Change is the only thing which is constant. You know, the world largest taxi company, Uber, does not own any vehicle. The world most popular media company, Facebook, does not create its own data. The world's most valuable retailer, that is Alibaba, does not have any inventory. World is changing. Out of the top 10 market capitalization company globally, only 2 are non-technology company, that is Saudi Aramco and Hathaway. Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, all are making value shift in the economy. And obviously we know the Zomatos of the world. Change is the part of life and it has always been the part of life. But you know, what has changed right now is the speed of change. The way world is changing is very, very fast. You don't know, you can't see the future, and adjustment is very, very at a very high speed. And the thing is that change is not an option right now. It has to be, apart from everything else which is changing, India is changing as well. And India is changing at a very faster pace. There was a time when we didn't have enough forex reserve to meet even a day's demand. And today, as on 31st December 2021, as on the data of 31st December 2021, our country's forex reserve was whopping 634 billion USD. This is equivalent to approximately 13 months of imports and higher than the country's external debt. Imagine this. As on the end of November 2021, this is as per our economic survey report 2022, India was fourth largest foreign exchange reserve holder in the world after China, Japan, and Switzerland. So this sizable accretion that has happened in the reserve has led to an improvement in external vulnerability indicators such as foreign exchange reserves to total external debt, short-term debt to foreign exchange reserves, etc. Now, these India's salient external sector sustainability indicators are very strong and much improved as compared to what it used to be in the time of financial global crisis or taper episode of 2013 that we have. And for instance, the import cover and the foreign exchange reserves are more than double now. And as per the economic survey, I'm taking all my database. So all the database that I have taken, my data points that I have taken in my presentation has been taken from either the economic survey report or it has been taken from DPIIT website because it comes with the FDI statistics every quarter. So what we were talking that as per the economic survey 2022, the combination of high foreign exchange reserves, sustained foreign direct investment and rising export earnings will provide a very good buffer against any liquidity tapering and monetary policy normalization that we have in 22-23. So the conclusion is that India is changing. India is changing. Let me tell you and substantiate this with few more facts to you. The amount of remittance under LRS that had been made in the month of January 2022 was 2018 million USD. The amount of ODI that was done in the month of February 2022 was 753 million USD. And the amount of FDI which is received by India as on 31st December 2021 was 17,933 million USD. And India is expected to grow at the rate of 8% minimum. I'm not saying it, everyone, you see any global body, IMF, World Bank, everyone is forecasting India's growth rate at least to be 7% and minimum 7%. We as a country are playing an increasingly more important role in global economic growth and has emerged as most beneficial and safe destination in whole world of investment. And there is not only one factor that is contributing to it, there's a whole lot of changes that are happening. Be it the deregulation of numerous sectors, simplification of processes, removal of legacy issues like retrospective tax, privatization, so many schemes that are coming from product-linked incentives and so on and so forth. And there are so many schemes that are being given by the government. There are so many trade bodies, trade facilitation desks, which are with different countries that we have numerous government initiatives created by government. We remember the time when we used to stand in queue for name approval, and now you see everything digital. All your government reportings, 95% of the government reportings, especially with RBI, have gone online. You don't have to go and stand in queue. You don't have to send physical documents to RBI. We are coming from the time when there used to be sectors in which the money could be borrowed. You remember that ECB, when anybody used to ask us that, Madam, can we borrow? We used to go and check whether it is falling under those sectors in which the external borrowing is allowed. Now, we have a negative list of the sectors in which money is not allowed to be borrowed. Otherwise, the money can be borrowed in all the sectors. You can borrow money from outside India, pledge your assets to foreign lenders, give guarantee, take guarantee, do whatever to expand your business. There are only specified sectors in which the companies cannot take foreign investment, otherwise all sectors are open. In her budget speech as well, what Nirmala Sitharaman ji emphasized on Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas, and Sabka Prayas. Definitely, with Sabka Prayas, we can make India shine in global space. So this is what is happening in international global trade, and this is the position of India as a country. Now, why this much of data? Why this much of sharing of information? Because we, as a chartered accountant, we are the custodians. We are the professionals which are relied on by RBI as a mediator, as their four eyes, as their two eyes. So any FDI in India cannot come without the valuation certificate being taken by a chartered accountant. Most of the inter-country trade that happen, most of the FOIMA regulations, you need a certificate from a chartered accountant. Adukia ji mentioned that FEMA is a act of only 49 sections. You know how many certificates that are required to be taken from chartered accountants under the act? Why? Because how RBI functions. RBI functions, there is an RBI, then there is AD Bank, then we chartered accountants are there, and then there is a management of the company. So first, anything that happens with regard to the foreign exchange, management of the company has to certify, then a chartered accountant has to certify, and on the basis of a certificate of a chartered accountant, AD gives you the go ahead, and on that RBI relies on that and gives you the go ahead. So that's why we chartered accountants are in fact the facilitators of the foreign investment in our country, and we have to attend this session and know what exactly is foreign direct investment policy, foreign investment policy of India is all about. Now, what is foreign investment? As a foreign direct investment is a strategic investment in a country and is considered as a major source of non-debt financial resource for economic development, and it infuses the long-term sustainable capital in the economy and contributes not only towards receiving the funds but also towards the technology transfer, development of strategic sectors, great innovation, competition, employment creation, amongst other benefits. And India, as I mentioned, is playing an increasingly important role in the global economic growth and is coming as one of the safest destination for the investment in the world. Foreign investment as such is a capital account transaction from the perspective of Foreign Exchange Management Act. FDI is a capital account transaction. India presently have full convertibility with regard to the current account transactions only, and partial convertibility with regard to capital account transaction. What does it mean? It means that there are still the restrictions with regard to undertaking the capital account transactions. With the relaxation and liberalization of capital account transaction, India as such is systematically moving towards fuller account convertibility. However, it is only said it looks to be far away. Just for the reference here, I mean, we are not going to discuss what is current and capital account and all that things here. Just for the reference here, capital account transactions are the transactions which alter the asset or liabilities, including contingent liability outside India of person resident in India, or asset or liabilities in India of person resident outside India. Now, through FDI, the foreign party is creating asset in India. That's why it is a capital account transaction. Moving towards, just give me 1 minute, please. So there has been a shift between the government. So how the FDI till now was that it was regulated by the RBI. However, with effect from 15th October 2019, power to regulate capital account transactions with regard to the non-debt instrument have been transferred to from Reserve Bank of India to the central government. The NDI rules, which has been given by the central bank, has replaced the FEMA 2022, which used to regulate the foreign investment in India till date. Now, what was the logic? So earlier, the foreign investment in India was regulated by Reserve Bank of India. Now the power has been shifted to central government. What is the logic? I mean, I think it's rightly shifted to the central government, and it was wrongly placed with the Reserve Bank of India. As you can see, the RBI is interested with making the monetary policy of the country, and fiscal policy of the country is made by the central government. So basically, monetary policy, it refers to the the activity of RBI influencing the quantity of money and credit in the economy, and fiscal policy is to by the government to make the decision about taxation, spending, where the money should come, and overall economic activity of the country. Now, RBI cannot be entrusted with the task of understanding which sector will need what amount of funds, which sector should be prohibited, which sector should be made under automatic route. So this power has rightly been shifted from RBI to central government as of now. Now, as of now, the central government has been given. So central government is dealing with the three tasks under the Ministry of Finance, is interested with the work of coming with rules on non-debt instruments. Ministry of Finance is entrusted with the enforcement directorate is formed for managing FEMA and enforcing FEMA in PMLA, and Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, is entrusted with the work of formation of India's foreign direct investment policy. So the present regulatory framework of FDI in India constitutes the rule frame by the central government under Section 46 of FEMA, and the consolidated FDI policy, which is issued from time to time. The government has put in place the framework on FDI, which is transparent, predictable, and easily comprehensible. This framework is embodied in the circulars on the consolidated FDI policy, which may be updated on the annual basis. However, it is usually not. It has not been the track record of DPIIT to update it on the annual basis. The last updation had been in 2020. So DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, is entrusted with the task of policy pronouncement on FDI through consolidated FDI policy, circular, press note, press releases, which are notified by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance. In addition to the rules and policy, the total regulatory framework of FDI in India over a period of time consists of rules, regulations, consolidated FDI policy, circular, press notes, press releases, clarification, etc. So this is the complete framework of the Indian FDI policy. Now, one thing which was not clear till now, and which always there was a lot of ambiguity, that in case there is a conflict between it. So till now, what was the case scenario? That RBI used to come up with the regulations with regard to FDI, and the government used to come with a consolidated FDI policy. So RBI is coming up with one thing, and it is not updated in the consolidated FDI policy. And now also, if you can see here, there are two government departments which are interested with the different work. So one department is interested with the formation of rules, and another department is interested with coming out with the FDI policy. So there may be the cases wherein there is a conflict between the rules and the FDI policy. So there was earlier, it used to be conflict, and in the FDI policy, which came in October 2020, it got clarified that in case there is a dispute between the rules and the FDI policy, in that case, rules are going to prevail. So now, in case there is something is being said in foreign exchange management, non-debt instrument rules 2019, and there is another thing which is being said in consolidated policy 2022, and those two things are in dispute with each other. In that case, NDI rules are going to prevail. There used to be master circulars which do not come. It has been done away with now. So brief on the history, the first FDI policy was issued in April 2010. It consolidated all the prior policies, regulations under FEMA, press note, press releases, clarification issued by DIPP, regulations by RBI under FEMA, and reflected the then current policy framework on FDI. Subsequently, the government issued the consolidated FDI policy in October 2010, April 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, June 2016, and August 2017. After August 2017, it came with the FDI policy directly in 2020. Until now also, this policy has not been updated. Now, between this period, 10 press notes were issued, 2 press notes were released in 2018, and 4 of them are got issued in 2019 and 20. And there were 4 press notes that were issued in 2021, and 1 has been issued in 2022 till date. And all these 4 press notes that had been released in 2021 liberalizes the Indian FDI policy further liberalizes the further Indian FDI policy further. So the Indian FDI policy as such is divided into the consolidated policy, which is Indian FDI policy. I am not talking about the NDI rules here. We'll be concentrating on the consolidated policy only. So what we have discussed that we have 2 sets of so-called regulations, 1 rules and 1 FDI policy given by 2 different departments of government which govern the foreign investment in India. And in case there is a conflict, in that case, the rules are going to prevail. So as such, the FDI policy is divided into 5 chapters. Chapter 1 talks about the intent and objective of the policy. Chapter 2 gives definitions like of the words and concepts, we can say, that are used in the FDI policy. Chapter 3 talks about the general conditions on FDI. Chapter 4 talks about the procedure for government approval. And Chapter 5 talks about the sector-specific conditions on FDI. Now, for the purpose of FDI in India, there are sectoral caps which are defined for each sector under the consolidated policy or NDI rules read with the press notes issued by DPIIT from time to time. These sectoral caps are the threshold limit till which the FDI can come in India in a particular sector. First, the sector is specified, and then the routes through which the FDI can come is specified. And for example, if the sector falls in the prohibited sector, the investment in that sector cannot be made. If the investment falls in the sector with sectoral cap, government route government approval is required till the time it falls in the approval route, and below that it can come in automatic route. And as I said, we have now negative list of sectors. That means that in the sectors which are not mentioned in FDI policy, they can come in automatic route. Automatic route, what does it mean? Automatic route means that investment does not require approval of government and only involves intimating the Reserve Bank of India post the inward remittances. Apart from the few expressly prohibited sectors in which the FDI cannot come, almost all the sectors fall under the automatic route. So you can receive the investment first, and post that you make the necessary reportings that are defined under the NDI rules, mode of reporting and mode and method of reporting in it can be the reportings can be done. Now, as opposite to the automatic rule, under approval route, prior approval of government is required before making investments in India. Such an application for approval is made to the respective ministry in which the sector might fall. And there used to be a foreign investment promotion board to which the application used to be made. However, it was abolished in January 2019. Now, application under approval route can be made online, and respective government ministry is mandated to clear the proposal of investment within the specified time. So the sector listed in the the sectors listed in FDI policy works like a negative list. All the sectors which have been specifically mentioned in FDI policy, which have not been specifically mentioned in FDI policy, they fall under the automatic route. We have already discussed that. Now, approval route includes the industries like mining and mining of titanium. Very few industries are presently in the approval route. Now, for the purpose of FDI, there are three categories of different sectoral cap, up to 26%, up to 49%, and up to 74%. Apart from these limits, there are two more limits: 51% under government route in multi-brand retail trading, and 20% in government route in banking, public sector banking. So we can again conclude that negative list of sectors in which investment cannot come. Otherwise, investment in India can come in every business. What are these businesses in which investment cannot come? As in which the investment is prohibited, in which Indian FDI policy says that in these sectors the investment cannot come. These are the mainly the speculative sectors. If you see, like lottery business, gambling and betting, and chit funds, nidhi companies trading in TDRs, real estate business, manufacturing of cigars, and activities which are not open for private sector investments like atomic energy, etc. Now, although the FDI policy is clear in most of the sense, however, there are some ambiguity here and there. However, some ambiguity comes also in understanding. A lot of time the queries come to us that, Madam, FDI in India prohibited? FDI in real estate in India is prohibited. No, FDI in real estate is not prohibited. It is prohibited in a very small segment of real estate. That is real estate per se, real estate, and it does not include most of the activities that we think that are included in real estate. For example, development of township, construction of residential and commercial premises. These are not included in real estate. So ambiguity may be there in some sector. However, in some sectors, there is an lack of understanding and reading also that happens. For example, one of the sector in which there is a definite ambiguity is in the space sector. What it says that space establishment and operation, it comes under approval route. However, nothing at all is defined that what is establishment, what is operation, what includes manufacturing in space, and it is just left to the imaginations of the investor to understand whether the money is going to come in approval route or it is going to come in uh, automatic route. So yeah, I mean, there are ambiguities as well, but very few ambiguities which are there. Government has been taking a lot of measures for increasing the FDI in India, and because of the efforts taken by the government, FDI policy has resulted in increased FDI inflows, setting up new records. FDI inflows in India, it stood at US 45.14 billion in 2014-15 and has been continuously increased since then. India registered its highest ever annual FDI inflow of USD 81.97 billion in 2021. It reflected a growth of 10% as compared to the previous year. The increase has been on the back of 20% in 1920. In the year 21-22, FDI inflow grew by 4% in the first 6 months to reach USD 42.86 billion as compared to 41.37 for the same period last year. Over the period, and why this FDI? What are the various initiatives that the government has been taking? It's been constant liberalization of FDI policy, curbing of opportunistic acquisition and takeover, improving on the transparency and to rationalize the processes. FDI monitoring and the FDI monitoring cell has been from a lot of initiatives that have been taken by the government. Now, if we talk about the liberalization, over the years, government has been liberalizing the sectoral caps as well as the routes under which the investment can come in various sectors. Now, recently, if you see, there has been one after other. 2021, as I said in beginning, was a year of liberalization only. One after other, the government had been rationalizing and liberalizing the Indian FDI policy. Recently, through press note 2021, the government relaxed the sectoral cap in defense sector and in manufacturing of small arms and ammunition under Arms Act, which is 100% in which 100% sectoral cap is liberalized to automatic route up to 74%, and government route beyond 74% from 49% under the automatic route. Private security agencies have been liberalized to sectoral cap of 74%, wherein entry route is automatic up to 49% and government route beyond 49% and up to 74%. Also, single brand product retail trading is fully through automatic route. Now, instead of being under automatic route up to 49% and government route beyond 49% as per the Foreign Exchange Management NDI rules 2019. Intermediaries or insurance intermediaries, including insurance brokers, reinsurance brokers, insurance consultants, corporate agents, third-party administrators, surveyors, and loss assessors, and such entities are at 100% now. So 100% FDI under automatic route has been permitted in Indian entities engaged in coal and ignite mining for captive consumption, for power project, iron and steel and cement units, and for other activities permitted under and subject to the provisions of Coal Mines Special Provisions Act 2015 and Mines and Mineral Development and Regulation Act 1957. So there has been a lot of liberalization, defense sector, insurance sector, petroleum and natural gas. Press note 3 of 2021, it issued to permit the foreign investment up to 100% under the automatic route in case of where the government has accorded in principle approval for strategic disinvestment of PSU engaged in petroleum and natural gas. Huge liberalization happening presently. And not only liberalization, apart from that, there are so many things that the government is doing, from curbing opportunistic acquisition and takeover. You remember that when 1% of HDFC Bank was taken around 2020 during the lockdown period, when there was a lot of threat of opportunistic acquisition and takeover, the government immediately amended the FDI policy to amend that any country which shares a land border with India, or where the beneficial owner of an investment into India is situated in a country which shares a land border with India, it can come only under government rule. So this was to protect and taking immediate action to prevent the opportunistic takeovers and acquisitions. Further to that, there has been a lot of measures to improve the transparency and to rationalize processes, including amendment of standard of operating procedure to improve ease of processing FDI proposals. The government ministries are having the time-bound timelines under which they have to dispose of the applications under the approval rule. Apart from it, FDI monitoring cell has been formed, which follows up with applicant investor to expedite FDI policy proposals with a view identify and hurdles, if any. Also, an interministerial committee has been constituted under the chairmanship of Secretary of Department of Promotion of Industries and Internal Trade to take appropriate decision on delayed proposals and those escalated by administrative ministries and departments. The FDI as such in India has been there in all the sectors. Different sectors have received different amount of FDI over a period of time. Also, the states-wide distribution of FDI is different. 17% of the FDI equity inflow have been received in service sector, 10% in computer software and hardware, and followed by 8% in telecommunication, 6% in trading, 5% in construction, development and automobile industry, 4% in chemicals and construction activities, and 3% in drugs and pharmaceuticals and hotel and tourism. As the service sector is the largest recipient of FDI inflow in India, according to World Investment Report 2021 by UN Conference on Trade and Development, India was 5th largest recipient of FDI in 2020, improving its rank by 4 places from 9th position in 2019. In 2020-21, India registered the highest level of FDI that we have already seen. So, and also the state-wise FDI flow has been different. 25% has been received in Maharashtra, and I am the proud resident of Mumbai. And 19% has been received in Karnataka, 16% in Delhi, 10% in Gujarat, 9% is received in Jharkhand, and minor share of 5%, 4%, 3%, 1% by Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Haryana, West Bengal, and Uttar Pradesh, respectively. So FDI is scattered over different states in India, and as such, and yeah, and also it is being received from all over the world. However, there are few countries from which we receive more FDI, like Mauritius, Singapore, rather than and US, and also we receive FDI from the countries like Germany. That is as such, if we can say that India has a robust and dynamic FDI policy. It balances the facilitation of FDI on one side to reap the benefits of foreign funding, and to keep a check on the sectors which are greater national interest and are not speculatory in nature, which are speculatory in nature. So government policy is balanced. Where the money is required, it comes under automatic route. Where the money is it can be of speculatory nature, it is prohibited, like buying and selling of property is absolutely prohibited. So basis that Indian FDI policy is very robust, dynamic. It places India in an investment-friendly jurisdiction. Every Indian company is capable of receiving FDI, and every Indian company is capable of complying with all the regulations of FDI. It is on each one of us to assist the companies in receiving the FDI by proper compliance and proper understanding of the regulation. As far as the government is concerned, it is doing its absolutely 100%. It is pro investment. It is on its way to make India a pro investment destination. There are I understand that if I can rate India in an investment friendly jurisdiction, we can rate India 7 out of 10. There are professionals, there are people who portray the FDI policy, the FEMA laws, the NDI rules as the very tough, very complicated to apply. However, it is not the case. India is a very investor friendly jurisdiction, and all the procedures mostly are online and it is easy to follow. If you have any queries, I'll be very happy to take. That is all regarding the Indian FDI policy from me today.
Thank you, Sudhaji, for your wonderful insights on this area, which a lot of people have never touched upon. And really, it's an amazing session. First, I also, personally, I've learned a lot in terms of what is though we have some of the understanding of capital account transactions, but the way you have taken it to a next level and the way you have given us the knowledge of legal and regulatory frameworks in India, and that is really commendable. So now I would like to take up the questionnaires that our lovely audiences are having. In case someone may have not put it their question, they can obviously ask for in the comment box and send us the queries. So let me take the first question. Ma'am, due to this Russia and Ukraine war, has it impacted India in terms of FDI, or globally, whether this has impacted FDI?
Okay, it's a very, very interesting question as such, depending on which side you are.
Though it is from my side only.
Okay, we have a real example wherein we had received. It was not an FDI. It is a transaction with Russia that the company had, and because of the sanctions on Russia, the company is gaining a lot. So it depends on which side you are. However, I think we are in a position to gain. It is on the better side for us.
That means if we are in India, we are at the better side.
Definitely, yes.
Okay. So moving on to the
Ukraine and Russia, direct investment is very less. So as such, directly we are not impacted that much.
Okay. So there is one question from Pankaj Singh. He wanted to ask, for starting the career in FEMA, from where we should start? Being a chartered or?
Yeah, I think, starting a career in FEMA is, FEMA as such is a huge ecosystem of opportunities. It starts with due diligence in FEMA to advisory to valuation and compounding. Lot of sets of professional opportunities are there, including professional certification. Now, starting it will be obviously with the knowledge. And when we talk about the subject, the knowledge lies in the basic framework. So if you are clear about basic framework, I think you can build on. Like बाकी एक्ट में क्या होता है that more in lies in rules and regulation. FEMA के अंदर basic में ज़्यादा understanding चाहिए. Rules and regulations are little bit straightforward. So basic understanding you start with, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but in any case, we are also coming with institute also, we are coming up with the courses. One is starting with 23rd of April, and there are so many courses that they can attend to start with.
Also from ma'am, from like I would say there are two types of CAs which are in practice. One is for the beginners, like those who have started their own practices, and in the 5 or 10 years of their practice, what benefit they can have from this FEMA or this law? What kind of assignments they could even get?
Well, I told you that it starts with there is lot of every regulation has some or other certification. As I mentioned, FDI in India cannot come without the certification of valuation by chartered accountant. Now, when you are receiving borrowing, every month a certificate from a CA is required that you are using the funds for which you had taken. Every year you need to file in case of the unincorporated entities, LOBO, PO, an annual activity certificate which needs to be authenticated by a chartered accountant. So as in, we can go on and on regarding the certification only, or certification forms a very small part. Then there are non-compliances for which compounding needs to be done. And mostly companies are not aware of these provisions, so we can help them out with the compounding. And another thing is FEMA due diligences. I would suggest all my professional friends who are auditors and who are CFOs of the companies, they should do FEMA audit of their balance sheet every year, at least twice, looking into, because every item of balance sheet has some or other applicability of FEMA. You can very well see whether it is complied with. If not complied with, whether it is falling in the time frame in which it can be complied. If it is compliable, do comply, otherwise go for compounding. So FEMA audit is another whole gamut of service which can be provided in that. And many more.
Wow, that's really great. I hope this would be helpful to all the audiences that we have currently.
Shubham,
The next question.
I would like to add one more aspect to what Sudha just said. For the young members at present, as we all might be aware, startup is a very booming subject in its own. Although it differs from FEMA and FDI aspect, but it is more into finance. So if we look for startups, we can have assignments like mentoring, making project reports, helping them get investors pitch deck, and so on.
And Sunay ji, under FEMA also, startup gives you another level of advisory, because only startups are allowed to issue the convertible notes. And when startups are receiving the foreign funding in the form of ECB, they can use it anywhere. There is no restriction on the usage. So those things, if we know, we can really help our startups as well.
And Sudha, I have one more question from my end. As far as FDI is concerned, so what is the average rate of return? I know it varies. I'm just asking, what would be the range of average return which FDI investors are seeking or they are getting in actual or in practice?
So as you will know that we are not allowed to give any assurance of the rate. So when you are receiving FDI, there is no assurance that can be given on the FDI. However, it depends from time to time, from company to company. And on a normal scenario, I have not seen in my practical experience that they are receiving, some companies are really receiving good interest, and some companies don't receive that much of good interest.
Okay.
I'm sure this
return on investment, yeah.
I'm sure this seminar is good enough that even a lot of people have many queries related to their own profession, and that will really be a great insight for them. So moving on to the next question that we have from Sundra Bahu. They wanted to ask why and how to resolve when there is a multiple layers of prescriptions of equal legislative sanction, say RBI, driving powers under the RBI Act and issuing guidelines, notification, and other executive issuing notification driving power under another act, for example, under FEMA.
I can say from FEMA perspective, but I think Mr. Sunay can throw light on it.
Yes, Shubham, could you come again? Could you repeat the last?
Yeah. Why and how to resolve when there is a multiple layer of prescriptions of equal legislative sanctions, say RBI driving powers under RBI Act and issuing guideline notification, and other executive or another person from some other department issuing notification with which are driving power under another act, for example, FEMA. So when there is a clash.
Yes, in case of clash of two statutes or act, firstly, both needs to be resolved. Like we need to reply or do the compliances under the both different statutes. And if at all there's a contradiction there, then we need to bring up that same aspect to both the departments. Like, look, in FEMA, it is this. Under RBI, it is this. According to us, to the assessee, we have this solution option possible. So maybe we need to keep both the departments, government officers in loop and try to find an amicable solution. Maybe meeting up the higher ups or at the JC and commissioner levels, like and maybe in RBI the other posts whom they address there. So some amicable solution would be possible there.
I would like to say it from when ambiguity is concerned, there inconsistency between various regulations. I think FEMA is the best example vis-a-vis the Companies Act. Earlier, there was a conflict between under how many days the shares needs to be issued. FEMA said 60 days, Companies Act gave you the time of 180 days. And right now, you know, there's a concept of registered valuer, which has come. Companies Act makes it mandatory that you have to get a valuation from registered valuer. FEMA doesn't make it mandatory, okay? And in few cases, the client is also required to take the valuation from merchant banker. Poor client, imagine he has to take the, under Companies Act, he has to go to the registered valuer. Under FEMA, he has to go compulsory to a CA or a cost accountant. Or if it is a listed company and it needs valuation under through merchant banker also. So these things right now, either we are complying with all. I mean, in case such a inconsistency is happening. However, there is lot which is done by the regulatory also to iron out these inconsistencies. Like the one I mentioned, one was that in case there is a dispute between NDI rules and consolidated FDI policy, which one will prevail? So now this time consolidated FDI policy make it clear that NDI rules will prevail. Yeah.
Okay, that's really great. Also, there was one question from Hemant Kothari. Please suggest a good book and resource for staying updated on FEMA.
I don't want to market my book here, but we have come up with a new book with textment on FEMA. And I can assure you that it is a work of my 20 years of working in FEMA. It's a good book, and it includes commentary. It includes as much as practical examples as possible, a relevant compounding order. So it's a good book. Otherwise, Institute also is coming up and updating its own publication on FEMA, which I am working on, and we will be out with the Institute publication also in one month's time or so. And BCAS is also working on the publication on FEMA, so that can also be used once it is out.
And also, one more questions. I think this is the last question that we have from Viraj Goyal. He wanted to know, could you please let us know the sectoral caps, segment and category wise, as it keeps on changing? So, to Sudha ma'am.
Yeah, so sectoral caps I discussed in the presentation, and I think until unless the sector is very specific, like one of the sector which we have dealt with was space industry, space sector, very specific sector and very specific product that our client company was making. Apart from that, all the sectors are under automatic route only. However, if you go to the annexures of FDI policy, it gives you categorically the sector and the route. So one has to know the sector. You go to FDI policy and it gives you the sector, and accordingly you can see it whether it is falling under automatic route or approval route. अगर approval है तो कितना % तक automatic है, कितना % उसके बाद कितना approval तक ले सकते हैं and all that. So I will share my PPT so that it can be shared.
Sure, that would be really great. And first of all, I want to congratulate both of you and want to thank both of you for being here and giving us the amazing presentation, as well as the to elaborate much wider, I would say, and it's really a good session, I would say. So this has been a great evening with such an amazing audience and our lovely viewers and audience. And I would like myself to thank each and every one of you for making this day a wonderful one. Thank you, Sudhaji and Sunil Jariwala-ji.
Yeah, Shubham, before you end, a hearty vote of thanks to you for doing the wonderful job today with us and taking this session forward. You put up the queries, Q&A in a very excellent manner. I would say one of the best I've ever encountered in my series of sessions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, madam and sir. It was indeed a great pleasure listening to you both, the speaker, on the suggested topics, and I am sure the same feeling is expressed by all the listener. And I am very grateful to moderator Shubham sir moderating this session wonderfully, and my thanks are due to both the speaker and moderator. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Chanda ma'am, for
thank you, Chanda ji,
taking out your time and inviting all of us to this wonderful session. It's a pleasure meeting you both. Thank you, Ayaz. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and all the faculty members and participants for joining this session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, now we may